At the airport lounge, my son told me, "Just sit here. We'll go check in and come right back." But then I realized they never intended to return. My son and daughter-in-law abandoned me, a disabled person in a wheelchair, alone in the airport. I couldn't accept it. I tried to pick up my smashed phone to find help. What that stranger woman did for me changed my life forever. Thank you for being here with me. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to question someone you trusted completely? I'd really like to know. Your thoughts matter more than you think. Quick note, some details in this story have been shaped for storytelling and reflection, but the lesson at its heart is what I hope stays with you. I've lived on this land for 35 years, and I know when the numbers don't match. The wheelchair rolls smooth over the packed dirt between the apple rows. Dawn comes late in March, and the mist hasn't burned off yet. I've got the long-reach pole shear balanced across my lap, lightweight carbon fiber custom grip, and I'm working through the lower branches of Eleanor's first row. She planted these trees with her own hands back in 1990, before the orchard stretched to 160 acres, before the tractor rolled and took my legs, before the stroke took her. The photograph on my kitchen table still shows her kneeling in the dirt, planting the very tree I'm pruning right now. I'm 60 years old, paraplegic since the accident 17 years ago, calloused hands that survived a John Deere rollover but never stopped working. This orchard is valued at $2.8 million, and I know every tree on it the way some men know poker hands. The tablet sits in the wheelchair's side pouch. I pull it out after finishing the third tree, wipe the screen with my sleeve, and open last year's harvest ledger. The county broker's deposit summary stares back at me: total reported revenue, total deposited revenue, and the gap between them. 12%, not 13, not 10. Exactly 12% unaccounted for. Roughly $47,000 that showed up on the broker contracts, but never made it to the farm account. My son Corbin handled those contracts. He'd driven out from Lincoln last September, all smiles and efficiency, said he'd streamline the sales process so I wouldn't have to deal with the hassle. I'd signed the broker authorization because he was my son, because Eleanor had raised him to be dependable, because I trusted him. I stare at the number until the screen dims, then I wake it up and stare some more. 12%. The branches need pruning. The mist needs burning off. The day needs starting. But I sit there in the cold Nebraska morning with my dead wife's trees all around me and a number that doesn't make sense, and I feel the first quiet alarm, the kind that doesn't ring loud, just sits in your chest like a stone. Some people say you stop noticing things when you get older. They're wrong. You start noticing everything. I notice the pattern. I notice the precision. 12% isn't a mistake, it's a system. And I noticed that Corbin never mentioned it. Never called to explain a discrepancy, never sent a follow-up email about a broker fee I might have missed. Just silence and $47,000 gone like morning fog. The wheelchair rolls back toward the house. The sun's up now, burning through the mist, and the day looks peaceful. Everything looks peaceful when you're 60 and paraplegic and living alone on land your wife planted. But I've learned something about peace. It's the quietest sound in the world, right up until it isn't. That same week, Corbin shows up. It's evening, unannounced. His truck pulls into the gravel drive with Vivian beside him. My daughter-in-law, 33 years old, always dressed like she's got somewhere better to be. She's wearing a cream blazer and heels that don't belong on a farm. Corbin's 35 now, tall and confident in a way that used to make me proud. He leans against the kitchen counter like he owns the place, all casual warmth, and says the thing that changes everything. "By the way, Dad, where do you keep the deed to the farm? Just need it for some paperwork." He says it like he's asking about the weather, like it's nothing. I'm at the table, hands flat on the wood. Eleanor refinished 20 years ago. I look at him, really look, and I see something I didn't see before, something in the way he's standing, The way his eyes are just a little too focused, a little too still. Paperwork for what, I ask. Oh, just a loan application, he says, waving a hand. Thinking about getting some capital to modernize the irrigation system. You know, help out. Vivienne's manicured fingers slide a glossy brochure across the table toward me. Arizona Retirement Community. Palm trees and infinity pools and smiling seniors who've never touched dirt in their lives. You deserve a real break, Harlan, she says, voice smooth as silk. Warm sun, no more winters, no more of this. She gestures vaguely at the kitchen, at the land beyond it, at everything Eleanor and I built. I pick up the brochure, flip through it, set it down. I'll think about it, I say, but I'm already thinking about something else entirely. I'm thinking about the way Corbin's eyes tracked my hand when I opened the drawer to put the brochure away. Not casually. Not the way you glance at movement. The way you watch something that matters. The way you memorize a location. That's when I understood the son asking me about the deed wasn't the same boy who used to climb these trees. They leave 20 minutes later. Corbin claps me on the shoulder, says he'll check in next week, says to take care. Vivienne smiles and doesn't mean it. The truck pulls away, gravel crunching under the tires, and I sit at the kitchen table in the quiet. Eleanor's photograph watches me from across the room. She's kneeling in the dirt, hands deep in Nebraska soil, planting the first apple tree. She believed in things taking root. She believed in family. I believed in it too. Corbin asked about that deed, the way someone asks about a spare key, the kind of casual that only comes when you've rehearsed the question a dozen times in your head. I answered the way someone answers when they know that key matters more than the asker thinks it does. And I watched his eyes. I watched them the whole time. 2 weeks later, he'd have me 100 miles away from that drawer. 2 weeks later, they took my truck. Corbin showed up in the orchard on a Wednesday morning with a U-Haul trailer hitched to his sedan and a speech about medical care. Better specialists in Lincoln, he said, closer to the hospital. The old farmhouse was too isolated, too hard to manage alone. He had it all planned out, a room in his house, physical therapy referrals, everything I needed. What he didn't say, the room was an attic space with a narrow doorway and a ceiling that sloped so low I could touch it from the wheelchair. What he didn't say, Lincoln was 100 miles from the orchard, from the land Eleanor and I had built together, from anyone who might notice. And what he definitely didn't say, he was taking the truck. This old thing's not safe for you anymore, Dad, Corbin said, patting the hood of my modified Ford F-150. The hand controls had cost me $8,000 to install after the accident. The lift system for the wheelchair, another $6,000. It wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. It was the difference between living on my land and being trapped on it. Runs fine, I said. I know you think so. But I can't risk you getting hurt. We'll keep it stored at the farm, make sure it's maintained. You can use it when you visit. When I visit. My own land. Vivienne stood beside him, arms crossed, nodding along like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. She was wearing designer jeans and boots that had never seen actual mud, and she kept glancing at her phone like she had somewhere better to be. Shelby Garrison watched from the orchard gate. 62 years old, retired from teaching my neighbor for 30 years. She'd brought over casseroles after Eleanor died, helped me navigate the wheelchair modifications, checked on me every week without being asked. Now she stood there with her hand raised in a wave that felt more like a question. I caught her eye as Corbin loaded the last box into the trailer. She didn't smile. Neither did I. The drive to Lincoln took 90 minutes. Corbin talked the whole way about the physical therapy center, about the grocery store, 2 blocks from his house, about how much easier everything would be. Vivienne sat in the back seat, silent, scrolling through her phone. I watched the orchard disappear in the side mirror, row after row of apple trees getting smaller, until they were just a green smudge on the horizon. 100 miles isn't a number, it's a design, and I had no wheels to erase it. Some prisons have bars. Some have 100 miles of interstate and a son who says he loves you. The attic room had a twin bed, a lamp, and a window that looked out at the neighbor's fence. Corbin carried my bags up the narrow stairs while I waited in the hallway, staring at the lift chair he'd installed on the rail. It groaned under my weight, slow and mechanical, nothing like the smooth independence of my own truck. "You'll get used to it," Corbin said, patting my shoulder. "Give it a week." I gave it 3. 3 weeks of narrow doorways and sloped ceilings. 3 weeks of asking permission to go outside, of waiting for Corbin to drive me to appointments I didn't need. 3 weeks of Vivian's tight smiles and Corbin's manufactured concern. 3 weeks of being 100 miles from the land deed I'd hidden in the kitchen drawer, the one Corbin had asked about so casually, the one his eyes had tracked so carefully. 3 weeks of silence. And then at midnight on a Thursday, I heard the printer. The sound cut through the quiet house like a knife, mechanical, rhythmic wrong. Printers don't run at midnight unless someone's printing something they don't want seen in daylight. I rolled the wheelchair as quietly as I could across the attic floor, out into the hallway, toward the stairs. Corbin's home office was on the first floor, door cracked open, light spilling into the hall. I stopped at the top of the stair lift, looking down through the gap. He was crouched in front of the wall-safe door, hanging open, papers scattered across the desk. Not just papers, documents, legal documents. I could see the county seal on one, the mortgage company logo on another. He was rifling through them with focused urgency, pulling out folders, checking contents, setting them aside, searching for something he hadn't found yet. That's the moment childhood ends. Not when your children leave home, but when you look at them through a door crack and realize you're looking at a stranger. I must have made a sound. Or maybe he just felt the weight of being watched. Corbin's head snapped up, eyes meeting mine through the gap in the door. For 3 seconds, neither of us moved. Then Vivian appeared from the kitchen, like she'd been waiting just off stage for her cue voice, bright and immediate. "We're just planning your vacation itinerary, Dad. Want to make sure everything's perfect for you." She moved between me and the office door, holding up that Arizona brochure from the kitchen table weeks ago, smiling like we were all in on the same happy secret. Behind her, I could see Corbin shoving papers back into the safe, hands moving fast. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, still smiling. I looked past her at my son. At the open safe. At the printer still humming on the desk. At the documents spread across the surface like evidence at a crime scene. I looked at Corbin, and he looked back, and in his eyes I saw something I'd been avoiding for weeks. Not guilt, not shame. Just cold calculation, the kind you see in someone who's already made their choice and is just waiting for you to catch up. "Just needed some water," I said. Vivian's smile didn't waver. "I'll get it for you. Go on back to bed." I turned the wheelchair around, rolled back to the attic room, closed the door, sat in the dark and listened to the printer stop. Listened to the safe click shut, listened to their voices murmuring downstairs, too quiet to hear words, loud enough to know they were recalibrating. I didn't ask what they were looking for. I didn't ask why the printer was running at midnight. I didn't ask a single thing. Not because I didn't know. Because I needed to know more before I spoke a single word. The next morning, Corbin would hand me the answer on a glossy piece of paper. The next morning, they served me coffee and smiled like nothing had happened. Sunlight streamed through the Lincoln kitchen windows. 3 ceramic mugs on the breakfast table. Corbin sat across from me in a flannel shirt, the kind people wear when they want to look approachable. Vivian hummed at the counter, buttering toast. The whole scene was staged too bright, too normal, too carefully arranged. Nobody mentioned the printer. Nobody mentioned the safe. Nobody mentioned that I'd caught them at midnight rifling through documents. Corbin leaned forward, hands wrapped around his mug. "We've been thinking, Dad, you deserve a real vacation. Arizona. Warm sun, no more Nebraska winters. There's a beautiful retirement community we want you to see. Just for a visit, of course." Vivian slid something across the table. Not the brochure this time. A printed itinerary. Glossy paper, full color, professionally formatted. Departure date, May 15th. Return date, May 18th. 3 days in Phoenix. Condo tour scheduled for 2 p.m. on the second day. Every detail planned, every hour accounted for. Look, Vivian said. I've printed everything out. Departure return dates, the condo tour schedule. We've thought of everything. I picked up the paper. The ink was still faint against my fingertips. Not fully dry. Fresh. And the smell, that chemical tang of laser printer toner, was the same smell from last night when I'd rolled past Corbin's office door. The same printer. This itinerary had been created at midnight during the same session when they were searching the safe. This wasn't something they'd been working on for weeks. This was something they'd printed in a panic after I caught them, which meant the trip wasn't the plan. The trip was part of the plan. I looked up at Corbin. He was watching me with manufactured warmth. What do you think? He asked. It'll be good for you. Get out of this cold. See some options. No pressure. Let me think about it, I said. The smile widened. Of course, Dad. Take your time. But don't worry about a thing. I'll handle everything. The flights, the wheelchair accommodations, the hotel, all of it. You just show up. I'll handle everything. That phrase hung in the air like smoke. Vivian sat down beside Corbin, and they both watched me with the same expectant expression. Waiting. Wanting me to say yes, to agree to make this easy. I folded the itinerary and set it beside my plate. I'll think about it, I said again. What does it mean when your family starts planning your life with the same tone travel agents use to sell timeshares? I know what it meant in that kitchen. It meant they'd already decided. The dates were set. The tickets were probably already purchased. This breakfast performance wasn't a proposal, it was a courtesy notification. And the word handle kept appearing in every sentence Corbin spoke. I'll handle the arrangements. I'll handle the paperwork. I'll handle everything. Translation, I'll control everything. I drank my coffee and watched them. Corbin scrolled through his phone, showing me photos of the retirement community, palm trees, swimming pools, people my age playing shuffleboard. Vivian added commentary about the amenities, the medical care, how much easier life would be without the burden of the orchard. The burden, that's what she called the land Eleanor and I had spent 35 years building. The 160 acres we'd planted tree by tree. The asset that represented every hour of labor, every harvest, every careful decision we'd made together. I nodded along, made the appropriate sounds. Let them think I was considering it, but I was thinking about the printer, about the safe, about the documents Corbin had been searching through at midnight, about the fact that this polished itinerary had been created in the same session during the same frantic cover-up. That's when I understood the printer hadn't been running for a vacation itinerary. It had been running for something much bigger, and this breakfast performance was just the cover story. The question was, what else had they printed? What other documents had they created while I slept in the attic room above them? And why did they need me in Arizona for 3 specific days in May? Corbin cleared the plates. Vivian refilled the coffee. They moved around the kitchen with practiced coordination, like actors who'd rehearsed their blocking. So we're thinking mid-May, Corbin said, casual as asking about the weather. Gives you a few weeks to prepare. And honestly, Dad, the timing's perfect. I've got some orchard business to handle while you're gone anyway, broker meetings, some contract renewals. Better if I can focus on that without worrying about you being alone out there. Orchard business, contract renewals, while I was gone. The coffee tasted like metal. I set the mug down carefully, hands steady, face neutral. Sounds reasonable, I said. Vivian beamed. Corbin clapped his hands together, once satisfied. Great. I'll finalize everything this week. You won't have to worry about a single detail. There it was again. That word. Handle. Control. Manage. Every sentence he spoke was about taking responsibility, taking charge, taking over. I nodded. Smiled. Played the part they needed me to play, the grateful father, the compliant old man, the burden being lifted and relocated to somewhere warmer and more convenient. and I thought about the drawer back in Kearney, the one where I'd tucked that Arizona brochure weeks ago, the one Corbin's eyes had tracked so carefully, the one that held the land deed he'd been searching for at midnight, the deed sitting 100 miles away where he couldn't reach it. Not yet. Corbin's promises echoed in the quiet room. A man who claims he will handle everything is a man seeking total control. And I was about to discover exactly how far he would go to get it. What I didn't know yet was that he'd already started handling things weeks before that breakfast table smile. That same week, while I was drinking coffee in Corbin's Lincoln kitchen, while I was feeling fresh printer ink on a glossy itinerary, while I was watching them smile and talk about Arizona sunshine, Corbin was already selling the orchard. I didn't know that yet. Wouldn't know for months. Not until Chester Pemberton spread the court records across his desk in Omaha and showed me what had been happening in rooms I'd never entered, in conversations I'd never heard, in documents that carried my name but not my knowledge. The first piece of evidence was dated April 23rd, a Tuesday. The same day, Corbin served me eggs and talked about warm weather. Rachel Whitmore, real estate agent with Prairie Line Realty. She met Corbin at a coffee shop in Lincoln Neutral Ground. Nothing suspicious, just a consultation between a concerned son and a professional. The kind of meeting that happens 1,000 times a day in cities across the country. Except this one was built on forgery. Corbin slid a document across the table. Power of attorney. My signature at the bottom clear as day. The header read, "Authorization to act on behalf of Harlan Norwood in all real estate matters." Dated 2 years prior. Notary seal. Witness signature. Everything legitimate. Except it wasn't. I had signed a power of attorney 2 years ago. That part was true, but it was for tax filing. Simple convenience so Corbin could submit my quarterly agricultural income reports to the IRS without me having to drive to Lincoln every 3 months. Limited scope. Specific purpose. The document said so in plain language: tax preparation and filing only. Someone had taken that signature page, scanned it, edited it, changed tax preparation and filing only to all real estate matters, changed the date, changed the scope, turned a convenience into a weapon. A signature is supposed to be your word made permanent. Mine had been cut, copied, and pasted into a lie. Rachel Whitmore's intake notes, later subpoenaed, told the rest. Client states he has full POA to execute sale on behalf of father due to declining health. Father is paraplegic, recently moved to assisted living arrangement. Client seeks to liquidate agricultural asset to fund ongoing care. Requesting CMA for 160-acre apple orchard, Kearney, NE. She never called me. Never sent a letter to verify. Never questioned why a man with declining health wouldn't be involved in selling his own $2.8 million property. She just accepted the document and started the paperwork. Comparative market analysis. Professional photographs. Property description. List price projections. All of it moving forward while I sat in that attic room 100 miles away, thinking about printer toner and midnight safe searches, not knowing that my land was already being measured, photographed, and priced. The document I'd signed years ago to let Corbin handle my quarterly tax payments had been digitally altered and turned into authorization to sell everything Eleanor and I had built. I stared at that forged signature months later in Chester's office, my name, my hand stolen and repurposed, and understood that trust is the easiest thing in the world to weaponize. But the real estate fraud was just the setup. The abandonment plan was already in motion. 11 days before that breakfast table proposal. 11 days before Corbin leaned forward with manufactured enthusiasm. 11 days before Vivienne slid the glossy itinerary across the wood. Vivienne sat at her computer in the Lincoln house and opened the airline booking portal. I know this because Chester subpoenaed the records. Because every keystroke, every search, every transaction leaves a digital trail. Because the truth doesn't disappear, just because someone prints a prettier version. The search history showed 3 tickets: Omaha to Phoenix, departure May 15th, Corbin Norwood round trip. Departure May 15th, return May 18th. Vivian Norwood round trip. Departure May 15th, return May 18th. Harlan Norwood. One way. Departure May 15th, return none. The confirmation code sat there in the database like a death sentence. OW. One way. The airline's designation for a ticket with no return flight purchased, no return flight intended. One way doesn't just mean no return flight. It means no return expected, no return planned, no return needed. Then Vivian did something that showed just how carefully they'd planned this. She opened graphic editing software, pulled up the confirmation email, selected the text that read "one way" next to my name, deleted it, typed in "round trip" instead, added a fake return date May 18th matching theirs, changed the formatting to match the airline's template, printed the altered itinerary on her home printer. The same printer I'd heard at midnight. The database didn't lie. No return flight searched for my name. Not for May 18th. Not for May 25th. Not for June or July or any month in the next 6 months. Just that single one-way departure on May 15th, paid in full, confirmed, and ticketed. They were going to fly me to Phoenix and leave me there. 60 years old, paraplegic in a city I'd never been to, with no wallet, no phone, no way home. That was the plan. That was what they'd paid for 11 days before sitting across from me with coffee and smiles. Chester showed me the evidence in sequence document by document, and I watched the whole conspiracy unfold in reverse. Saw the shape of it, saw the timeline, saw how every piece connected the forged POA, the real estate listing the one-way ticket, the Arizona brochure, the midnight printer session. They'd thought of everything. They bought that ticket 11 days before they sat across from me at the breakfast table. 11 days before Corbin leaned forward with manufactured warmth and talked about sunshine and palm trees. 11 days before Vivian slid that glossy itinerary across the wood and told me they'd thought of everything. They had. They'd thought of everything except the possibility that I might survive long enough to read the evidence. But there was one more document, one I didn't know about yet, already waiting in a mailbox 100 miles away. The proof was already there, waiting in a metal box I couldn't reach. I didn't know it yet, wouldn't know for weeks, but while I was sitting in Lincoln counting down the hours until Tuesday morning, an envelope sat in the Orchard mailbox in Kearney. Buffalo County seal embossed in blue, addressed to Harlan Norwood property owner. Official, automated, irrefutable. The Buffalo County Assessor's Office doesn't care about family drama. It doesn't care about abandoned fathers or forged documents or sons who lie. It just processes requests and sends notifications according to protocol. Mechanical, precise. Every inquiry logged. Every record accessed, every timestamp preserved. Corbin had filed a third-party inquiry 3 weeks earlier. Request for land deed records, request for owner information, request for transfer procedures. The system recorded it all: name, date, purpose, exact timestamp. Then it did what automated government systems do. It generated a notification letter and mailed it to the property address on file. The letter detailed everything. The inquiry type. The requesting party's name, Corbin Norwood. The specific parcel, 160 acres, agricultural zoning, Kearney, Nebraska. The timestamp, April 20th, exactly 3 weeks before the scheduled departure to Phoenix. 3 weeks before they'd hand me that glossy itinerary across the breakfast table. 3 weeks of planning, positioning, preparing. And the government had documented every step without knowing it was documenting a crime. Evidence is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits in mailboxes and databases and automated systems that never forget, never sleep, never lie. But I didn't know about the letter, I was 100 miles north in an attic room with sloped ceilings staring at the dark and trying to prepare for something I couldn't fully name yet. Something I felt in my bones, the way you feel weather changing before the first cloud appears. The metal mailbox sat at the end of the gravel drive, where Eleanor used to walk every afternoon to collect the mail. Where Shelby would still check it sometimes when she drove past, making sure nothing important got buried under flyers and catalogs. Where that Buffalo County envelope sat sealed and waiting proof of premeditation in Times New Roman 12-point font. Waiting, like I was waiting. The night before the trip, I couldn't sleep. The attic room in Lincoln felt smaller in the dark. The ceiling sloped low enough that I could touch it from the wheelchair without stretching. The window showed nothing but the neighbor's fence, a strip of weak light from their porch lamp, cutting through the glass. I kept Eleanor's photograph on the nightstand. The same one I'd carried from Kearney, her kneeling in the dirt in 1990, planting the first apple tree row with her bare hands. Soil under her fingernails, sun on her face. Smiling at something I'd said off camera, something I couldn't remember anymore but could still feel the shape of. Corbin used to climb those trees. That's what I kept thinking about. Not the man who'd forged documents and booked one-way tickets. The boy. 6 years old, barefoot in summer, shinning up the trunks to reach the highest apples. Eleanor would stand below with her arms out, not because she thought he'd fall, but because it made him laugh. He'd drop the apples into her hands one by one, red and green and perfect. "Got another one, Mom? Biggest one yet." His voice echoing through the rows, her voice answering back, the sound of family when family meant something safe. The boy who climbed apple trees, and the man who forged documents to sell them. Somewhere between those two people, I lost my son long before he abandoned me. I sat in the dark and let that truth settle. Didn't fight it. Didn't soften it. Just looked at it square the way you look at an X-ray that shows exactly what's broken. Then I reached for the notepad on the nightstand. Shelby had mentioned a name once. 6 months ago, maybe longer. We'd been sitting on my porch in Kearney talking about estate planning, and she'd said something about her cousin working with an elder law attorney in Omaha. Good man. Fair prices. Helped families navigate complicated situations. Chester Pemberton. I'd filed the name away without thinking much about it. Didn't need a lawyer then. Had Corbin to help with paperwork. Had family I could trust. I wrote the name slowly, deliberately, pen pressing deep into the paper. Below it, the phone number Shelby had recited. I didn't call. Not yet. The Lincoln house was quiet, but walls are thin, and I didn't know who might be listening. Didn't know what questions a midnight call to an attorney might trigger. But I wrote it down. Made it real. Made it preparation instead of panic. Just in case, because I'd survived worse. The John Deere tractor rollover 17 years ago that crushed both my legs and left me in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. The morning I woke up beside Eleanor and realized she wasn't breathing, that the stroke had taken her in the night while I slept 3 inches away. I'd survived losing my mobility. I'd survived losing my wife. I'd learned that survival isn't about strength. It's about what you do in the hour after catastrophe hits. Tomorrow morning, Corbin would push my wheelchair through Epley Airfield. Vivian would smile and check the itinerary and talk about sunshine and retirement communities. They'd hand me a boarding pass and guide me through security and settle me into a window seat like the caring family they were pretending to be. And then, if I was right, if the midnight printer and the forged documents and the one-way ticket meant what I thought they meant, they'd leave me there. I closed the notepad and set it on the nightstand next to Eleanor's photograph. I'd survived the tractor rollover that took my legs. I'd survived waking up alone the morning Eleanor didn't. Tomorrow morning, Corbin would push my wheelchair into Epley Airfield, and I'd need to survive one more time. The difference was, this time I'd written down the name of a lawyer first, because some kinds of survival require witnesses. Tuesday morning came exactly on schedule. Corbin appeared at the attic room door at 6:30, all smiles and manufactured enthusiasm, carrying coffee in a travel mug. Like this was a real family trip. Vivian's voice floated up from downstairs, bright and cheerful, calling out updates about traffic and weather. Beautiful day for flying Harlan, not a cloud in sight. I'd been awake for 2 hours. Dressed. Packed. The notepad with Chester Pemberton's name and number tucked into the inside pocket of my jacket, where no one would think to look. Ready. Because some kinds of survival require witnesses, and I was about to find out if I'd need one. The drive from Lincoln to Epley Airfield took an hour. Corbin drove the rental van with exaggerated care, checking mirrors, signaling lane changes, narrating the route like he was proving something. Vivian sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, occasionally reading aloud from the weather app or the flight status updates. Everything normal. Everything planned. Everything exactly as the glossy itinerary had promised. I sat in the back beside the wheelchair, strapped in, watching Nebraska farmland roll past the window and thinking about metal mailboxes and forged signatures and one-way tickets purchased 11 days before anyone asked permission. We arrived at Epley at 8:15. Corbin pulled up to the departures curb, unloaded the wheelchair with practiced efficiency, and helped me transfer from the van seat. Vivian handled the luggage. They moved like a choreographed team, smooth coordinated, every step rehearsed. The terminal smelled like coffee and jet fuel and floor cleaner. Cold white fluorescent lighting washed out everything, made the crowds look pale and tired. Morning travelers streamed past us toward check-in desks and security lines, pulling roller bags, checking phones, living their ordinary Tuesday morning lives. Corbin pushed the wheelchair toward the check-in kiosk. "Let me hold on to everything, Dad," he said, reaching for my jacket pocket. "Easier if I have all the documents in one place. You just relax and enjoy the ride." His hand was already moving. Not asking, taking. My wallet. My ID. My boarding pass that Vivian had printed on that midnight printer. He slid them into his own jacket pocket with the smooth motion of someone who'd planned exactly when and how to do this. "Don't want you worrying about keeping track of things," he added, smiling. "I've got it all handled." There was that word again. Handled. I had nothing now. No identification. No money. No proof of who I was or where I belonged. Just a 60-year-old paraplegic man in a wheelchair, being pushed through an airport by people who looked like family. You learn things when you survive a tractor rollover. You learn to notice what people don't say. You learn to count exits. You learn to watch hands. I watched Corbin's hands as he pushed the wheelchair through the terminal, and I watched where he steered me, not randomly, not the most direct route to the security checkpoint. He moved with intention, taking specific paths through the crowd, angling the wheelchair at deliberate degrees. He avoided the wall-mounted camera near the check-in desk. I saw it, black dome bolted to the wall 6 feet up, lens pointing at the ticket counters. Corbin saw it too. He steered us wide, taking the longer route around a support pillar, keeping the wheelchairs back to the camera the whole time, then past the second one. Mounted above the security line entrance, angled down to catch faces. Corbin picked a path that kept his own face turned away, kept me positioned between him and the lens. 3 cameras total. Wall-mounted. Obvious. The kind anyone planning something would notice and avoid. Corbin had studied this terminal. Knew the camera positions. Planned his route. But he never looked up. The man pushing my wheelchair through Epley Airfield wore my son's face and used my son's voice, but he moved like someone executing a plan, not like someone taking his father on vacation. Vivian walked beside us, scrolling through her phone, checking the gate number, playing her part. She didn't look at the cameras either. Didn't need to. She trusted Corbin to handle the details, to handle everything. We moved deeper into the terminal, past the coffee shops and newsstands, past the gate waiting areas where families sat with carry-on bags and kids with tablets, past the bathrooms and the charging stations, and directly under the dome camera embedded in the ceiling tiles. I saw it the moment we walked beneath it. Flush-mounted, fisheye lens, 360-degree coverage. The kind airport security installs specifically to eliminate blind spots to catch the angles the wall cameras miss. The kind designed so there's nowhere to hide. Corbin walked us right under it. Steady pace. Confident. Focused on avoiding the obvious cameras, the ones mounted at eye level where you'd expect them. He'd done his research, studied the layout, mapped his route to dodge the visible surveillance, but he'd missed one because he never looked up. Never considered that the ceiling might be watching. Never thought to check for the dome cameras that airports hide in plain sight, disguised as light fixtures or smoke detectors or architectural features. I didn't say anything, didn't point it out. Just sat in the wheelchair and let him push me through the terminal while the lens above us recorded every step, every angle, every deliberate camera avoidance maneuver that proved this wasn't chance or coincidence. This was premeditation, and now it was documented. Vivienne checked her phone again. "Gate C7, she said. "We've got time. Want to grab a coffee before boarding?" Corbin shook his head. "Let's just get Dad settled first. Find a good spot where he can be comfortable." A good spot. I felt it then, the shift. The moment when the performance was about to end, and the real plan was about to start. Corbin's hands tightened slightly on the wheelchair handles. His pace changed. Not slower. More purposeful. He was looking for something. A specific location. A specific position. A spot where he could leave me. I counted them as we moved through the terminal. 3 cameras Corbin avoided, wall-mounted, obvious, the kind anyone planning something would notice. He walked careful paths around each one, steering the wheelchair with deliberate angles. But he never looked up. The dome camera embedded in the ceiling tiles sat directly above us, lens wide enough to catch everything, and Corbin had no idea it was there. He thought he'd found the perfect blind spot. The spot Corbin chose was perfect for what he was planning. A quiet corner tucked beside a massive concrete pillar just past gate C7, away from the main flow of travelers, out of sight from the check-in desks and the security checkpoint. The kind of place people walk past without noticing. The kind of place someone could sit for hours and nobody would think to ask why. Corbin positioned the wheelchair with precision, angled it so my back was to the wall, facing out toward the terminal. Then he bent down eye level with me and adjusted the warm blanket over my lap. His hands were gentle. His voice was soft. "It's packed today, Dad," he said, tucking the edges of the blanket around my legs. "Sit here and hold our spots while we check in and grab the boarding passes. We'll be right back. 5 minutes tops." He squeezed my shoulder, warm, reassuring, the way a son touches his father. Then he stood up, reached down, and pulled the phone from my hand. I didn't have time to react. Didn't have time to close my fingers or pull away. He just took it, smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed the motion, and before I could say a word, he dropped it. The phone hit the terminal floor hard. Screen side down. The sound was sharp and final. When it bounced, I saw the spiderweb cracks spreading across the glass. "This thing's broken anyway, Dad," Corbin said, not looking at me. "We'll buy you a new one in Phoenix. A better one." Vivienne moved in from my other side. Her fingers were already in my jacket pocket before I understood what was happening. She pulled out my wallet, brown leather worn smooth from 30 years, in the same pocket, and my passport. "I'll hold on to these for you," she said, smiling. "Crowds like this, it's easy to lose things. Don't want you worrying about pickpockets." She slipped both items into her purse, zipped it shut. Corbin grabbed the handle of his rolling suitcase. Vivienne did the same. They turned, and they walked away, just like that. No hesitation. No looking back. Rolling their luggage toward the gates, merging into the flow of travelers, becoming 2 more people in the crowd, heading somewhere they'd planned to go. That was the last sentence Corbin spoke to me as a son. I sat there in the wheelchair with the warm blanket over my lap and watched them disappear into the terminal crowd. Watched until I couldn't tell which rolling suitcase was theirs. Watched until they were gone. The PA system announced boarding. Final call for Phoenix. Gate closing. I sat there and counted the minutes. 1 hour and 23. The broken phone lay on the floor just out of reach. Screen cracked, but still flickering. I could see the backlight pulsing faint and irregular, like a heartbeat, trying to decide whether to stop. I pulled myself forward in the wheelchair, straining against the armrests, reaching down as far as my spine would allow. My fingers brushed the edge of the phone case. Once. Twice. Third time I got enough grip to pull it toward me. 15% battery. Screen shattered but responsive. I dialed Corbin's number. User busy. I dialed again. User busy. The PA system announced another flight. Dallas. Then Denver. Then Chicago. The terminal moved around me, people rushing to gates, families saying goodbye, businessmen checking watches. Life continuing like it always does, indifferent to the man in the wheelchair, sitting alone beside a concrete pillar. I tried Corbin's number a third time. Fourth, fifth. User busy. User busy. User busy. He'd blocked me, or turned off his phone, or both. The phone vibrated in my hand. Text message. Vivian's number. I opened it. Dad, we're on the plane. The orchard has been sold. All your clothes have been shipped directly to your new address in Phoenix. Don't try to come back to Lincoln. We've already terminated the lease on that house. Take care of yourself. I read it once. Read it again. Read it a third time. The words didn't change. The orchard has been sold. 5 words. 35 years of Eleanor's hands in that soil, her back bent over seedlings, her voice reading planting schedules out loud while I mixed fertilizer. The first row she planted in 1990. The expansion in 95. The harvest that finally turned profitable in 2001. Every tree I knew by heart. Every acre mapped in my memory. Sold. While I sat in an airport 100 miles away with a broken phone and no way home, they'd shipped my belongings to an address that didn't exist. Terminated a lease I'd never signed. Closed every door. Cut every line. Severed every connection between me and the life I'd built. Methodical. Thorough. Complete. The phone slipped from my hand. It hit the floor again, same spot, same sound, and I sat there in that wheelchair, with the blanket over my lap, and felt something break inside me that had nothing to do with screens or batteries or signal strength. I cried. Just once. Not loud. Not for long. Just a single moment where the weight of it crushed down and I couldn't hold it back anymore. 60 years old. Paraplegic. Abandoned in an airport terminal by the sun. I'd raised the son Eleanor had loved, the boy who used to climb apple trees barefoot and laugh. Gone. All of it gone. Then I stopped, because I learned something sitting there on that cold floor with a broken phone and no wallet and no way home. I learned that anger is a luxury I cannot afford. Not when survival takes everything you have left. Not when crying doesn't change the facts and rage doesn't put the phone back together. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I looked at the terminal around me, the crowds, the gates, the fluorescent lights, the dome camera embedded in the ceiling tiles directly above where I sat. I took a breath, and I started thinking, because tears don't get you off a terminal floor. And I was about to need every ounce of clarity I had left. That's when I heard the voice. Someone picked up the phone. I looked up and saw a woman in ground crew uniform bending down to retrieve the shattered device from the terminal floor. Not security. Not TSA. Just someone who worked here walking past who'd stopped because an old man was crying beside a broken phone. She stood there holding it, looking at the cracked screen. I watched her eyes move across the glass, reading the text message still glowing through the spiderweb cracks. The orchard has been sold. Your clothes have been shipped. Don't try to come back. She read it all. Didn't skim. Didn't glance and move on. Read the entire thing while standing perfectly still in the middle of Epley Airfield with travelers streaming past. Then she looked up at me, I looked back. She didn't say, "Can I help you?" She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She didn't offer sympathy or ask questions. She said 5 words. "Do you want to get out of here?" Direct, clear, just the question that mattered. I looked at this woman I'd never met. 28 years old, maybe 30. Ground crew uniform with her name stitched over the breast pocket, T. Madden. Dark hair pulled back. Eyes that had seen enough to recognize abandonment when they saw it. I said yes. She nodded once. "Okay, let's go." She helped me navigate the wheelchair through the terminal, out through the sliding doors, into the parking garage where her car sat 3 levels up. A 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dented bumper and an airport employee parking permit hanging from the rearview mirror. She helped me transfer from the wheelchair to the passenger seat, folded the chair, and loaded it into the trunk. She got in the driver's seat, started the engine. "Where?" she asked. I gave her the address. The Orchard in Kearney. She nodded and got on Highway 180 westbound. Strangers are just family you haven't earned yet. Sometimes they're the only family that matters. The highway stretched out ahead, flat gold Nebraska fields under late afternoon sun. Teresa drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, saying nothing. So I talked. I told her everything. Chronologically. Calmly. The same way I'd give report at shift change. The harvest revenue gap. The midnight printer. The forged documents. The one-way ticket. The abandoned wheelchair. Just facts. No emotion. She didn't interrupt once. Didn't ask questions or make sympathetic sounds. Just drove and listened with the kind of attention that proves someone is actually hearing you. I finished somewhere around Lincoln. Fell silent. Watched the fields roll past. We drove for another 20 minutes in complete quiet. Then halfway to Kearney, she spoke. "I was orphaned when I was 10, she said, voice steady, eyes on the highway. 6 different foster homes, some better than others. None of them mine. I never had an address I could call home until I got the job at Epley 4 years ago." She shifted lanes to pass a semi. "I know what it feels like to have no roof to go back to," she continued. "To sit somewhere and realize nobody's coming, nobody's looking, nobody even knows you're missing." She glanced at me for just a second. "I wasn't going to let you sit there alone." I looked at her. Really looked. Saw the 10-year-old girl who'd learned that family is a word people use until it becomes inconvenient. Saw the woman who'd turned that lesson into something else, into the kind of person who stops when they see someone crying. She said the word home like she was still looking for it. I said it like I was afraid I'd already lost it. Neither of us knew we were about to build it together. I stopped calculating, stopped analyzing, stopped running through contingencies and legal strategies. I just nodded. "Thank you," I said. She nodded back. We drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd lost everything they were supposed to have heading toward the one place that might still be standing. The Kearney exit appeared exactly where it always had. Teresa took the off-ramp without needing directions. I guided her through the turns left at the grain elevator, right at the fork, straight for 2 miles on gravel. The orchard came into view. Row after row of apple trees stretching across the land. Eleanor's trees. The ones she'd planted with her own hands. The ones Corbin had sold, while I sat in an airport 100 miles away. Except he hadn't. Not yet. Because the deed was still in the kitchen drawer, and a forged power of attorney doesn't transfer title without the original document. The old house sat at the end of the gravel drive. White clapboard siding, green shutters. The porch where Eleanor used to shell peas in summer. Teresa pulled into the drive and stopped. I looked at the house, at the water pump by the side door, at the loose brick in the foundation, just to the left of the pump handle. The key. Corbin had taken my wallet, my ID, my phone. He'd sold my orchard on paper and shipped my belongings to nowhere. He'd terminated a lease and bought a one-way ticket and left me on a terminal floor with nothing. But he'd never needed the house key. Never thought to look for it. Never knew it existed. I pointed at the loose brick. "There," I said. Teresa got out, walked to the foundation, and pulled the brick free. Behind it, wrapped in plastic to keep it dry, was the spare key, right where it had been for 35 years. Right where I knew it would be. They took everything except the one thing that mattered. The scent hit us before we even opened the door. Apples, ripe and heavy, ready for harvest. The smell carried across the gravel drive from the rows, stretching out in every direction, sunset, turning the leaves gold and the fruit dark red against the evening light. The orchard was still alive, still growing, still producing exactly the way Eleanor had designed it 35 years ago, when she'd mapped out the irrigation lines and calculated the row spacing. Completely indifferent to Corbin's schemes, Teresa helped me from the car to the wheelchair, unfolded it from the trunk, and wheeled me up the path to the side door. I turned the key, the one that had been under the brick for 3.5 decades, and the lock clicked open like it had never been away. The house appeared exactly as I'd left it weeks ago, when Corbin had loaded me into that rental van with manufactured concern and driven me to Lincoln. The kitchen table sat under the window where it always had. The photograph of Eleanor planting the first row still stood on the counter. The floorboards creaked in the same spots. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Teresa pushed the wheelchair through the doorway, and I breathed in the familiar smell, old wood and linseed oil, and the faint ghost of Eleanor's lavender soap that I swore I could still detect even after all these years. I wheeled myself to the kitchen table, the same spot I'd occupied every morning for 35 years, the same worn groove in the wood where my coffee mug had rested 10,000 times, the same view through the window of Eleanor's first row of apple trees. I put my hand on the table, just rested it there, felt the grain under my palm. Physical memory. This was my territory, not Corbin's, not the real estate agent's, not the forged signature on a fraudulent power of attorney. Mine. Teresa stood near the door, giving me space, watching quietly. After a long moment, she spoke. "Do you need anything?" I looked at her. This woman who'd picked up a broken phone in an airport terminal and decided to drive a stranger 100 miles home. This woman who knew what it felt like to have no roof to go back to, and had made sure I didn't sit there alone. I didn't need rest. I didn't need comfort. I didn't need time to process or recover or come to terms with what had happened. I needed a lawyer. I reached for the notepad on the counter, the one I'd written in the night before Corbin pushed my wheelchair through Epley Airfield. The one with Chester Pemberton's name and phone number in my careful handwriting. I passed it to Teresa. "Call this number," I said. She looked at the notepad, looked at me, nodded once and pulled out her phone. Territory isn't just land. It's the place you know better than anyone else breathing. It's the advantage no one can strip away. I know every tree on this orchard. Know which rows flood in heavy rain and which stay dry. Know where the soil is richest and where it needs amendment. Know the exact week in September when the Honeycrisp apples hit peak sugar content. Know the sound the irrigation system makes when a valve needs replacing. I know the loose brick by the water pump. I know the key hidden behind it. I know the deed tucked in the kitchen drawer. Corbin had studied this place enough to forge documents and hire a real estate agent. But he'd never lived here, never worked the land, never sat at this table for 35 years watching the seasons turn. He knew the orchard like a tourist knows a museum. I knew it like a body knows its own bones. That was the difference. And in the war that was coming, that difference mattered. Teresa stood by the window with her phone to her ear, waiting for someone to answer. The sunset light caught her profile, this stranger who'd become something else in the span of 2 hours on Interstate 80. 35 years of sitting at this table. Eleanor across from me every morning until she wasn't. Corbin climbing through that door as a child covered in apple-picking dirt, laughing, calling for his mom. The wood remembered all of it even when I wanted to forget. I looked out the window at the rows Eleanor had planted, at the trees that had survived drought and hail and 17 Nebraska winters since the tractor rollover, at the land Corbin thought he could sell with a forged signature and a one-way ticket. He'd been so careful, so methodical. Midnight printer sessions and altered documents and rehearsed smiles over breakfast tables. He'd thought of everything, except one thing. He'd assumed that stripping me of money, phone, and transportation meant stripping me of options. He'd assumed that abandoning me at an airport 100 miles away meant I'd have nowhere to go and no way to fight back. He'd assumed wrong, because I'd made it back. Back to the one place he couldn't control, couldn't access, couldn't manipulate from a distance. Back to the fortress built on 35 years of muscle memory and local knowledge and roots that went deeper than any document he could forge. Teresa lowered the phone. "He's answering," she said. I nodded. Took a breath. Prepared to tell the story one more time chronologically, calmly, with the precision of someone who knows exactly what they're asking for and why. Corbin thought he'd stripped everything I had. No money, he was right. No car, he was right. No phone, he was right. No place to go, he was wrong. Because the orchard, the 160 acres Eleanor and I planted with our own hands, the fortress I know like my own heartbeat, was the one thing he couldn't take. And I was about to use every inch of it. Starting with a phone call he'd never see coming. Chester Pemberton answered his own phone on the second ring. No secretary, no gatekeeper, no hold music. Just a man's voice, steady and direct, saying his own name like he'd been waiting for the call. Teresa handed me the phone across the kitchen table. I took it, looked at Eleanor's photograph on the counter one more time, and started talking. I laid it out the way I'd been trained chronologically, no emotion, just facts. 12 years I'd worked as a nurse before the tractor rollover, giving shift change reports. The same way every time patient presentation timeline of events interventions attempted current status. That's how I told Chester Pemberton what my son had done. The breakfast table in Lincoln. The manufactured enthusiasm. The printed itinerary with fresh ink. The drive to Epley Airfield. The wheelchair positioned beside the concrete pillar. The phone smashed on the terminal floor. The wallet and passport taken. 90 minutes alone. The text message declaring the orchard sold belongings, shipped lease terminated. Chester didn't interrupt once. Didn't ask clarifying questions. Didn't make sympathetic sounds. Just listened with the kind of silence that proves someone is cataloging every detail for later use. When I finished, there was a pause. I heard papers rustling on his end. Then he spoke. "You did 3 things right in the first hour that most families never think to do. You didn't let them take you to Phoenix. You called me, and you kept that broken phone." Another pause. "Don't lose it. I'll be there tomorrow morning." The line went dead. I handed the phone back to Teresa. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. "He's coming," I said. She nodded. We didn't talk much after that. Teresa made coffee. I sat at the table and looked out the window at Eleanor's apple rose turning dark against the evening sky. Somewhere in Phoenix, Corbin and Vivian were settling into their hotel, believing I was still sitting in that airport terminal with no money and no way home. They were wrong, and they were about to find out how wrong. Chester Pemberton arrived the next morning at 8 o'clock sharp. 65 years old, gray suit, leather briefcase, and the kind of handshake that says, "He's shaken 1,000 hands exactly like yours and remembers every single one." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table Eleanor had refinished 20 years ago, same table Corbin had eaten breakfast at as a child, and spread out documents like a field surgeon laying out instruments. "The power of attorney you signed for Corbin to handle your tax payments has been severely abused," Chester said, not looking up from the papers. "We revoke it immediately. We draft a new one for someone you trust." He looked up at me, waiting. I didn't hesitate. "Teresa," I said. Chester turned to her. She was standing near the counter, coffee mug in hand, watching the whole thing with those eyes that had seen 6 foster homes and knew what trust actually cost. "Do you understand the legal gravity of this assignment?" Chester asked her directly. She nodded. No questions. No hesitation. Just a nod. "Power of attorney sounds like a gift of trust." It is. That's why abusing it is the perfect crime. You weaponize the signature someone gave you in good faith. Chester pulled out the forms. Teresa signed. I signed. Chester notarized with the embosser he'd brought in his briefcase, the metal pressing into the paper with that final sounding click. It was done. Teresa set down her coffee mug and picked up her car keys. I have to head back to Omaha for my evening shift, she said, looking at me. Call me if you need anything, Harlan. She walked out the door. I watched through the window as her Honda pulled down the gravel drive and disappeared toward the highway. Chester watched too. She's not staying, he asked. I turned back to him. She knows I don't need someone to stay, I said. I need someone who comes back. Chester studied me for a moment. Then he nodded and opened his briefcase again. Next step, he said. That afternoon, we drove to Chester's office in Kearney, a small suite above the downtown hardware store, 3 rooms, and a paralegal who'd been with him for 20 years. Chester sat at his desk and dialed a number from memory. Denise Farrell, he said when someone answered. Adult Protective Services. He put it on speaker. A woman's voice came through, carrying the weight of someone who'd heard every variation of family betrayal and stopped being surprised decades ago. Chester, she said. What have you got? He laid out the facts. Airport abandonment. Forged documents. Vulnerable adult exploitation. Denise Farrell listened, 55 years old, and 30 years of watching families do terrible things to their elders, and her response was immediate. I've seen this before. No shock. No outrage. Just documentation. File it, she said. I'll open the case. Chester hung up and looked at me. Now the urgent part, he said. He started typing on his computer, pulling up court filing templates. Emergency motion for subpoena duces tecum, he explained. We force Epley Airfield to preserve and produce all security camera footage from Tuesday morning. The problem is timing. He looked up. Airport security systems auto-overwrite footage every 30 days. You were abandoned on Tuesday. Today is Friday. That gives us 72 hours before the evidence vanishes forever. 72 hours. 3 days. That's how long truth lasts before it gets overwritten by the next 30 days of airport traffic and forgotten faces. Camera footage is the one thing they cannot explain away, Chester said, typing. Did he check his watch? Did he look back? How long did he wait before walking away? How long did he? I wasn't looking, I said. Chester nodded without stopping his typing. The camera will tell us. He printed the motion, signed it, scanned it, filed it electronically to the district court with a CC to Epley's legal department. Timestamp 3:47 p.m. Chester leaned back in his chair. Now we wait for the judge, he said. But the clock is running 72 hours. I looked at the filed motion on his computer screen, at the legal language that would force the airport to preserve what Corbin thought would disappear, at the timestamp proving we'd acted immediately. 72 hours. The footage would auto-delete in 72 hours, and we'd have nothing but my word against Corbin's polished performance. Chester filed the emergency motion that afternoon. We didn't wait. We didn't hesitate. Because the camera had seen everything Corbin thought no one would ever see, and it wasn't the only evidence waiting to be found. The letter had been waiting for weeks. Teresa stopped by the orchard the next morning, before her Omaha shift coffee travel mug in one hand, keys in the other. She walked out to the metal mailbox at the end of the gravel drive, the one I hadn't been able to reach for weeks, while Corbin had me isolated in Lincoln, and came back carrying a large envelope. Buffalo County Assessor/Recorder's Office seal embossed in blue ink, addressed to Harlan Norwood, property owner. She handed it to me across the kitchen table. I opened it. Automated government notification. Standard form. The kind county offices send out 1,000 times a day without thinking twice. But this one mattered. Notice third-party inquiry regarding land deed records and owner information changes has been initiated. Requesting party Corbin Norwood. Purpose title transfer procedures. Request date and timestamp April 20th, 2025, 2:47 p.m. I read it twice, set it on the table, looked at the date, April 20th. 3 weeks before the trip. 3 weeks before the breakfast table proposal. 3 weeks before Corbin pushed my wheelchair through Epley Airfield and left me beside a concrete pillar. They started this before they even put me in the car for the airport, I said. Teresa leaned over to read the date herself. So they never planned on coming back, she said quietly. I looked at her. They never needed to plan on it. The government logs everything. Request dates, timestamps, names, digital signatures. Every inquiry, every form, every search leaves a trail that can't be erased or edited or explained away. Corbin thought he was being careful. He'd studied the cameras. He'd rehearsed the performance. He'd planned the timing. But he had no idea that the Buffalo County Assessor's Office automatically mails a notification to the property owner every single time someone requests information about changing a deed. Automated. Unstoppable. Already in the mail before he'd even bought the one-way ticket. Governments are slow and bureaucratic until you need proof someone lied. Then every automated timestamp becomes a witness that never forgets. Teresa picked up the envelope. Chester needs to see this. He will, I said, this afternoon. She left for her shift. I sat at the kitchen table looking at that county notification and thinking about the pieces falling into place. The forged power of attorney, the one-way ticket, the text message about the sold orchard, and now this. Time-stamped proof that Corbin had been planning the sale 3 weeks before. He smiled at me over breakfast and talked about Arizona sunshine. Premeditation. That afternoon, I wheeled into the study, Eleanor's old sewing room that I'd converted to an office after she died. The computer sat on the desk, exactly where I'd left it weeks ago. I logged into social media, found my brother Wade's profile, started a screen recording. Then I hit the video call button. Wade Norwood answered on the third ring. 55 years old, my younger brother, the one who'd always been just one bad investment away from bankruptcy. Currently, that bad investment was an auto repair shop in Grand Island that the bank was 3 weeks from seizing. The video connected. Slot machines and casino music blared in the background. Wade was somewhere loud, somewhere he could gamble away money he didn't have while his business circled the drain. He saw my account name on his screen and his face lit up. "Hey, big bro," he shouted over the noise. "Enjoying the warm Phoenix weather, bet it beats Nebraska, huh?" He thought I was in Arizona. Thought Corbin had succeeded. Thought I was calling from whatever retirement community address they'd fabricated. I stayed silent. Let the recording run. Wade kept talking, getting louder, more animated. "Listen, don't blame Corbin for this, okay? The bank was about to foreclose on my shop. If we didn't sell that orchard and split the cash, the whole family would be out on the street." He laughed, loud and unguarded like he'd just told a good joke. "I mean, you don't need all that land at your age anyway, right? And Corbin said you'd understand once you got settled in Phoenix. Fresh start for everybody, my brother." Laughing about selling the land Eleanor planted with her own hands. Laughing like it was a poker game he'd won, like foreclosure and fraud and abandonment were just smart business moves. He had no idea he'd just bet everything and lost. I let him finish. Let him dig the hole as deep as it would go. Then I leaned forward toward the camera. "Wade," I said, "look closely at the screen." He stopped laughing, squinted at the video feed. I watched the realization drain the color from his face. Watched him understand that the background behind me wasn't a Phoenix retirement home. It was Eleanor's study. The orchard study. The room he'd been in 100 times as a kid. I was home, not in Arizona, not abandoned, not lost. Home. "Wait," Wade started. The call cut. He'd hit disconnect so fast I almost laughed, but the recording had already saved. Automatically. To the cloud. Wade's face. Wade's voice. Wade's full confession about the bank foreclosure and the orchard sale and splitting the money. Every word captured, every second time-stamped, every admission preserved in digital clarity that couldn't be denied or walked back. I stopped the screen recording. exported the file, attached it to an email. Subject line, audio/video evidence, Wade Norwood confession. Recipient Chester Pemberton. I hit send. The recording saved automatically. I forwarded it to Chester immediately before Wade could call Corbin to warn him they'd been caught. But Corbin was about to find out anyway. 3 days after I sent Wade's confession to Chester, Corbin tried to access my medical accounts. I found out later Chester had sources at the Phoenix Health System who flagged the attempt. Corbin had called the hospital billing department trying to schedule follow-up appointments for me, claiming he needed to coordinate my ongoing care as my medical power of attorney. The system rejected him. All POA authorizations revoked. New attorney in fact on file, Teresa Madden, effective immediately. That's when Corbin called me. My phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was at the kitchen table reviewing the harvest ledgers, the same ones that showed the revenue gap Corbin had created months ago. I looked at the caller ID. Corbin Norwood. I answered. What the hell did you do? No greeting, no pretense, just fury, raw and immediate. I didn't say anything, just held the phone and listened. I tried to schedule your appointments and they said my authorization was revoked. They said some woman named Teresa Madden is your new POA. Who is that? What did you do? My hands started shaking, not from fear, from the effort it took to stay silent, to breathe slowly, to let him keep talking. You can't just cut me out like this. I'm your son. I've been handling your medical care, your finances, everything. You don't get to just... He stopped, caught himself, realized what he'd said. Handling your finances, not handling your medical appointments, not coordinating your care, handling your finances. The truth slipping out in anger before he could dress it up in concern. Corbin, I said quietly, the power of attorney you had was supposed to be for tax filing. Remember quarterly agricultural income reports. Silence on the other end. You signed that document 5 years ago, I continued. Limited scope, specific purpose. When did you decide it meant you could sell my land? More silence. Then his voice changed. Colder. Harder. I don't know what lies that woman has been telling you, but you're making a serious mistake. I'm trying to help you. We're trying to help you. And if you're not competent enough to see that, then what? I asked. You'll have me declared incompetent file for guardianship. Take me back to that airport and finish what you started. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. My hands were still shaking. I made them stop. Breathed in, held it, breathed out. Let his anger exhaust itself against the wall I'd built. Let him rage and threaten and reveal exactly what he'd expected when he signed that forged power of attorney. Permanent control, not temporary medical authority. Permanent financial control over everything Eleanor and I had built. He'd expected it, planned for it. And now it was gone. 2 days later, Teresa called. I got served, she said. No preamble, just statement of fact. I was in the orchard office, the small room off the barn where I kept the business records. Through the window, I could see the seasonal workers moving through the rows, thinning apple blossoms, removing the excess flowers so the remaining fruit would grow larger, stronger, better, cutting away what looked healthy to make room for what mattered. What are the charges? I asked. Papers rustled on her end. Elder abuse, undue influence, isolation from family, manipulation of a vulnerable adult for financial gain. She paused. They're saying I coerced you into revoking Corbin's power of attorney so I could steal the orchard myself. I looked out at the workers, at the blossoms falling to the ground, at the trees Eleanor had planted with her own hands, now being tended by people who understood that growth requires pruning. Read me the relief requested, I said, more rustling. Petition for emergency protective order removing me as POA. Restoration of Corbin Norwood as sole legal representative. Injunction preventing me from having any contact with you. And... She stopped. And what? They're asking the court to order a competency evaluation. They want a judge to determine if you're capable of making your own decisions. I smiled. Couldn't help it. Teresa, I said, this is the best thing that could have happened. Silence. I'm being sued for elder abuse, she said slowly. How is that the best thing? Because now it's not a family dispute. It's a legal proceeding, which means discovery, which means both sides have to produce financial records, bank statements, transaction histories, everything. I heard her take a breath. They're asking the court to look at my finances, I continued, to examine whether I was manipulated. But the court doesn't just look at one side. They look at everyone involved, including the people claiming I need protection. Another pause, then, so Corbin's accounts will be subpoenaed, along with Vivian's, along with Wade's, along with every transaction related to the orchard, the harvest revenue, the forged documents, the real estate listings, all of it. Through the window, a worker reached up and snipped a cluster of blossoms. They fell to the ground like snow, making room, creating space for the fruit that would actually ripen. They handed us discovery, I said, wrapped it in a lawsuit and delivered it themselves. Teresa was quiet for a long moment. Chester needs to see these papers, she finally said. He will, today, and Teresa. Yeah, thank you for staying. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Let them try to stop me. The call ended. I sat in the orchard office and looked at the papers spread across the desk. Financial records, harvest logs, bank statements showing the missing revenue, the county assessor letter with Corbin's inquiry, time-stamped 3 weeks before the trip, Wade's video confession, the broken phone with Vivian's text message, and now a lawsuit that would force the court to examine all of it. Corbin thought he was attacking, thought he was protecting himself by going on offense, thought that suing Teresa would make me back down. He was wrong. Their lawsuit forces the court to look at the records, all the records, even the ones they want hidden. The first hidden record would be the harvest revenue. The second would be caught on camera. Teresa arrived at this orchard office on a Tuesday morning with her laptop and 3 years of transaction records printed on paper. She spread them across the desk, buyer contracts, deposit confirmations, bank statements, and I knew what we were about to find would hurt. Not because I didn't suspect it, because suspicion and proof are different animals. Show me March, I said. The anomaly I found in the ledgers. She pulled up the harvest records. Last year's apple crop. 160 acres producing roughly $400,000 in gross revenue. Standard buyer contracts with the regional distributor. Everything documented. Then she pulled up the bank deposits. $368,000. Not 400,000. 368. 32,000 short. Run the math backwards, I said. 8%. Teresa typed. Calculated. Looked up at me. Exactly 8%, she confirmed. I wheeled closer to the desk. Now check the year before. She pulled up 2023. Harvest revenue 380,000 gross. Deposited 350,000. 30,000 short. 8%. He started this much earlier than I thought, I said. Teresa was already pulling up 2022. Same pattern. 8% missing. Every major harvest. Clean. Systematic. Not random theft calculated extraction. These withdrawals match every major harvest since 2023, Teresa said, voice flat. He set up a shell account. Skimmed 8% off every buyer payment before it hit your main account. You'd see the deposits and think that's what the buyer paid. But the buyer paid more. Corbin just kept the difference. $47,000 total. 2 years of systematic theft. Not impulsive airport rage. Not sudden desperation. Planned, executed, hidden in plain sight. This is evidence for the court discovery, Teresa said. I nodded. Print everything. Buyer contracts showing the full amounts. Bank deposits showing the short amounts. Every statement. Every discrepancy. She started printing. The office filled with the sound of the printer's same mechanical rhythm as the one I'd heard at midnight in Lincoln. Same sound. Different purpose. This time the documents would be used against him. I sat there watching the papers stack up and thought about Corbin climbing these same apple trees as a boy. Learning the business. helping with harvest, standing beside me while I explained how buyer contracts worked, how to calculate tonnage, how to negotiate fair prices. He'd learned. He'd just used the knowledge differently than I'd intended. That weekend, Vivian came to the orchard, Saturday afternoon. Her car pulled up the gravel drive alone, no Corbin, no rental van, just her sedan with Arizona plates. I was on the porch when she parked. She got out, walked toward the house, stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Then she knelt, right there on the boards my grandfather had laid in 1948. Knelt like she was praying, like she was begging. "Please, Dad," she said, voice breaking. "We're drowning in debt because of your medical bills. The hospital is threatening collections. We're losing everything. I know we made mistakes, but we were desperate. Please, just sign the withdrawal. Let us sell the orchard. Save the family." Tears on her face. Real ones. Or convincing enough. I watched my daughter-in-law kneel on the porch boards my grandfather laid in 1948, and I felt nothing. No sympathy. No anger. Just the cold observation of someone watching a performance they'd seen before. I stayed silent. She kept crying, kept pleading, kept talking about hardship and family and sacrifice. I didn't move, didn't speak, just sat in the wheelchair and waited. The tears slowed, stopped. She looked up at me, waiting for a response. I gave her nothing. Then her face changed. The grief vanished. The pleading expression dropped like a mask someone had gotten tired of wearing. She stood up, wiped her face with the back of her hand. And when she spoke again, her voice was different, cold, hard. Nothing like the woman who'd been weeping 30 seconds ago. "You think you can just sit here and keep this land while we lose everything?" Her voice cut through the afternoon air like glass breaking. "You think you can just ignore all the years we've been part of this family?" She stepped closer. I didn't move. "Sign the withdrawal," she said. "Sign it or we will take this to the courts immediately. We have doctors who will look into your clinical records. We have lawyers ready to file formal guardianship papers. We will challenge your management of this orchard, whether you cooperate or not." She stared at me. I stared back. "If you choose to fight us," she continued, "we will ensure the legal system moves you to a structured care facility permanently. Is that what you want? To leave this house and spend your remaining years in an institutional care program handled entirely by strangers?" I still didn't speak. She waited, realized she wasn't getting a response, turned on her heel and walked back to the car. Engine started. Gravel crunched under tires. She drove away, fast dust cloud trailing behind her sedan as it disappeared down the drive toward the highway. I sat on the porch and watched her go. Above the doorframe, a small green LED blinked steadily. The security camera Chester had suggested I install after the airport incident. Professional grade, motion activated, cloud backup. Recording. Vivienne had knelt on my porch and cried fake tears. Then she'd stood up and threatened to throw me in a cell if I didn't sign away the orchard Eleanor and I had built together. Every word captured, every expression, every transition from grief to rage. She didn't know I'd installed cameras after Chester suggested it. The green LED blinked silently above the doorframe, recording every word, every threat, every mask drop moment. Didn't see a reason to tell her. Chester will know exactly what to do with this footage. Shelby called at dawn to tell me I was being watched. "Gray sedan," she said, voice low like she was trying not to be heard. "Parked 200 yards past your gate. Same spot for 3 days now. Different drivers." I wheeled to the kitchen window. Couldn't see the road from there, but I knew the spot she meant. Pull off near the irrigation ditch. Good sight line to the house and orchard entrance. "Private investigator," I said. "That's what I figured. Thought you should know." "Thank you, Shelby." I hung up, made coffee, thought about it. Corbin had hired someone to watch me, document my daily routines, gather evidence of cognitive decline to support his lawsuit claiming I'd been manipulated by Teresa. Fine, let him watch. That morning I wheeled out to the orchard slower than usual. Stopped in the middle of a row for no reason. Stared at the trees, moved the wheelchair forward 3 feet. Stopped again. Stared some more. I knew exactly what I was doing. Reviewing the irrigation setup, checking for aphid damage, planning the fall harvest schedule. But from 200 yards away through binoculars, it looked like an old man in a wheelchair who'd forgotten where he was going. I did it again the next day, and the day after, maneuvering slower, pausing mid-task, letting the PI log disorientation and confusion in whatever report he was filing. Meanwhile, every morning at 4 a.m. before the sun came up, I sat at the kitchen table with the accounting logs and read for 3 hours straight. Transaction histories, contract discrepancies, bank statements, building the timeline of systematic theft with the same precision I'd once used to chart patient vitals during 12-hour nursing shifts. The PI never saw that part. He started surveillance at 7 a.m. By then, I was outside playing confused. Shelby called again on the 4th day. "He's still there," she said. "But I talked to my husband. He says Corbin's buying it. The PI report supposedly says you're declining fast." I smiled into the phone. "Good. You're doing this on purpose," Shelby said. It wasn't a question. "Let him watch me look confused," I said. "Won't hurt my case when Dr. Evander Hayes certifies I'm fully competent. I've spent 60 years pruning apple trees, cutting away what looks healthy to strengthen what remains. Sometimes you have to let people think they're winning so they stop watching for the real threat." Before I show you what Chester and I compiled into that binder, if you're still with me, comment. If you think this ends in court, or B, if you think Corbin tries something desperate first, add one reason why. Quick note, what follows includes some recreated details for narrative depth. The lesson is what matters. 2 weeks before the trial, Chester and Teresa came to the orchard with boxes of documents and a 3-ring binder so thick it barely closed. We spread everything across the kitchen table. The same table where Corbin had eaten breakfast as a child. The same table where Vivian had slid that Arizona brochure across the wood with her manicured fingers. Now it held evidence. Chester organized it into 3 sections, color-coded tabs, professional, methodical. "Red section," he said, sliding documents into plastic sleeves. "Forgery documentation. The altered power of attorney. The real estate listing Corbin initiated. County assessor notification showing the timeline. Rachel Whitmore's intake notes from Prairie Line Realty. All of it proving premeditation." Teresa added the financial records. Harvest revenue discrepancies. The shell account. 2 years of systematic 8% theft totaling $47,000. Blue section, Chester continued. Abandonment proof. The one-way ticket. Airline database records. The text message from Vivian's phone declaring the orchard sold. Epley Airfield security footage. He paused, looked at me, and the porch camera footage of Vivian's threats. Teresa's hands shook slightly as she slid the USB drive containing Vivian's security footage into the blue section sleeve. The moment where my daughter-in-law had knelt on the porch crying fake tears, then stood up and called me a useless cripple who should rot in a cell. All recorded, all time-stamped, all admissible. Yellow section, Chester said. Competence certification. Dr. Evander Hayes, your neurologist from Phoenix, completed a full cognitive evaluation yesterday. Memory tests, executive function, decision-making capacity. You scored in the 95th percentile for your age group. He slid the signed certification into the yellow sleeve. Not a single emotional accusation in this entire binder, Chester said, closing the cover. Just an ironclad timeline. Dates, timestamps, bank records, government notifications, video evidence, medical certification, facts that can't be argued with or explained away. I looked at the binder. 3 inches thick. Every piece of evidence we'd gathered since Teresa had picked up that broken phone at Epley Airfield and asked if I wanted to get out of there. Don't need to prove they're evil, I said. Only need to prove I'm safe. Chester nodded. Exactly. Teresa stood at the window looking out at Eleanor's apple rows. The trees we'd planted together 35 years ago. The land Corbin had tried to sell while I sat abandoned in an airport terminal. When's the trial? She asked quietly. August 3rd, Chester said. 2 weeks from today. Buffalo County Courthouse. Judge Lancaster presiding. I wheeled closer to the table, looked at the binder sitting there in the afternoon light. Red tabs, blue tabs, yellow tabs. Every theft, every threat, every lie. Every piece of evidence Corbin thought would never be found. What happens if we win? Teresa asked. Chester packed his briefcase. Corbin's lawsuit against you gets dismissed. Harlan's competence is established on the record. The criminal referrals move forward. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery. Adult Protective Services continues monitoring, and Harlan keeps his orchard. And if we lose, Chester stopped packing, looked at her. We won't, he said. They left an hour later. Teresa back to Omaha for her evening shift. Chester back to his office to file the final pre-trial motions. I sat alone at the kitchen table with the binder. Picked it up, felt the weight, heavier than I expected. Not because of the paper, because of what it represented. Every moment since that breakfast table in Lincoln, when Corbin had smiled and talked about Arizona sunshine. Every lie, every calculated move, every piece of the conspiracy to take everything Eleanor and I had built. All of it documented, organized, ready. I rested the binder on my lap, balanced over the wheelchair armrests, and felt the weight of everything they'd handed me. Every theft, every threat, every lie, all bound in 3 colors. Now we take it to court. The trial started tomorrow morning at 9. Tonight I sat on the porch and watched the orchard swallow itself in shadow. Teresa found me there after sunset, and neither of us spoke for a long time. She'd driven out from Omaha after her shift ended. Didn't call ahead. Didn't ask if I needed company. Just pulled up the gravel drive parked beside the house and walked up the porch steps carrying 2 bottles of water. She handed me one. Sat down on the wooden step beside my wheelchair. Unscrewed her bottle cap. Took a drink. We sat in the heavy silence that comes when words would only get in the way. The sky turned from blue to purple to black. The first stars appeared. Crickets started their evening chorus. Somewhere in the far rows, an irrigation sprinkler clicked on with that familiar mechanical rhythm I'd been hearing for 35 years. Eleanor used to sit here with me on summer evenings. Right here on this same porch. We'd watch the sunset turn the apple leaves gold and talk about harvest projections, equipment repairs, things that needed doing. Sometimes we'd just sit quiet like this, comfortable in the silence. 2 people who'd worked the same land long enough that they didn't need to fill every moment with conversation. Teresa reminded me of that. Not because she was anything like Eleanor, she wasn't, but because she understood that some silences are gifts, not gaps. Finally she spoke. Are you afraid? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the answer I was supposed to give. The truth. I was afraid when I sat alone at that airport, I said. 90 minutes in a wheelchair with no phone, no wallet, no way home. That was fear, real fear, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone. I paused, looked out at the dark rows, but I'm not alone anymore. Chester knows what he's doing. You're here. The evidence is documented. The truth is on paper. So no, I'm not afraid. Teresa nodded slowly. Didn't say anything. Just acknowledged it. She turned to look at the orchard. Even in the darkness, you could make out the first row, Eleanor's row, the one she'd planted with her own hands in 1990, when we'd bought this land and decided to build something that would last. She planted this row, didn't she? Teresa asked quietly. I looked at the trees Eleanor had put in the ground 35 years ago. Saplings then. Mature producers now. Still bearing fruit every fall. Still standing exactly where she'd positioned them, measured out with string and stakes and careful mathematics. First thing she did after we signed the deed, I said. Didn't wait for spring. Didn't hire it out. Just got the saplings from the nursery and planted them herself. 20 trees in that row. She knew every one by heart. Teresa was quiet for a moment. Corbin used to climb them, I continued. When he was 6, 7 years old, Eleanor would stand below with her arms out. Not because she thought he'd fall, just because it made him laugh. The memory sat there between us. Not painful, just present. The orchard remembers both versions, I said. The boy who climbed the trees, the man who tried to sell them. Eleanor's trees stood in rows like courtroom witnesses, silent, rooted, unbending. They'd seen every season, every harvest, every moment of the life we'd built here. And they'd still be standing long after tomorrow's hearing was over, regardless of how it ended. That's what land does. It outlasts the people who fight over it. We sat there as the stars sharpened overhead. The orchard dissolved into pure darkness, the rows invisible now except for the faint shapes of tree trunks against the slightly lighter sky. I heard Teresa shift beside me, felt her hand reach over and rest on the wheelchair armrest next to mine. Not holding, just touching. Anchor point. We both stared at the same darkness. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said finally, you did everything right. Every step, every piece of evidence, every decision. We did everything right, I corrected. You picked up a broken phone in an airport and drove a stranger home. That's where this started. Her hand stayed on the armrest. I've been thinking about what Chester said, Teresa continued. About not making it emotional, just presenting facts. He's right, I said. Judges don't care about anger. They care about timelines, documentation, evidence that speaks for itself. So you're just going to sit there tomorrow and let the binder do the talking? I smiled in the dark. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Because I'd learned something in the months since Corbin had pushed my wheelchair through Epley Airfield and walked away. I'd learned it watching him perform concern at breakfast tables, watching Vivian cry fake tears on this same porch, watching Wade laugh about foreclosure and family and smart business moves. The loudest voice in the room is usually the one with the weakest position, the person who has to convince you they're right. The performance meant to distract from the absence of facts. Eleanor had known that. She'd been the quietest person in any room, and also the one everyone listened to when she finally spoke, because her words had weight, substance, truth that didn't need volume to carry. Tomorrow morning, Corbin would bring his lawyer, his rehearsed story, his manufactured evidence of my supposed incompetence, his lawsuit claiming Teresa had manipulated me, and I would bring 3 inches of documentation, color-coded tabs, government timestamps, bank records, security footage, medical certification, audio confessions, video evidence. Not a single word would need to be shouted. Teresa stood up from the porch step, stretched, looked at her watch. I should let you get some rest, she said. Tomorrow's going to be long. You staying in town tonight? Got a room at the hotel near the courthouse. I'll meet you there in the morning. She walked to her car, started the engine, pulled down the drive with headlights cutting through the dark. I sat on the porch alone and looked at Eleanor's trees one more time. Tomorrow I won't need to raise my voice. The loudest person is rarely the one telling the truth. I learned that watching my son lie for months while I sat quiet gathering proof. The courtroom will hear everything now. The courtroom heard everything. Starting that morning in the Buffalo County Courthouse hallway, Corbin stood at the far end in a suit I'd never seen before. Navy blue. Pressed. Expensive. The kind you wear when you need to look like someone who cares about appearances. Vivian beside him in a cream dress and pearls. Both of them polished. Both of them ready. Teresa pushed my wheelchair through the entrance. Chester walked beside us carrying his briefcase and the binder. Shelby Garrison followed quietly. She'd come as a witness, someone who'd known me for 30 years, and could testify to my competence if needed. And Wade Norwood stood near the water fountain fidgeting with his car keys and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. 2 factions, same family, opposite sides of the marble hallway. We stopped about 20 feet apart. Nobody moved closer. Nobody spoke. I looked at Corbin. Really looked. Made him see me looking. He glanced away. Found something fascinating about the floor tiles. Couldn't hold eye contact. Couldn't meet the eyes of the father he'd left in an airport terminal 90 minutes and walked away from. That told me everything I needed to know. Then I turned my gaze to Vivian. Gave her a slight nod. Just acknowledgement. Just I see you. Her face tightened. The polished mask slipped for half a second before she caught it and smoothed it back into place. But I'd seen it. The flicker of uncertainty. The realization that I knew about the porch camera. About the threats. About the performance. Chester leaned down slightly. "Don't say anything until we're inside," he murmured. I nodded. Teresa whispered from behind the wheelchair. "He won't even look at you." "I know," I said quietly. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "All parties in Norwood versus Madden courtroom is ready." We filed in. Corbin and his attorney on one side, Teresa Chester and me on the other. The gallery filled with observers, Shelby Wade, a few courthouse regulars who showed up to family court hearings like other people watched daytime television. Judge Lancaster entered. Everyone stood. She took her seat at the bench, 60 years old, with 30 years of family court experience written in the lines around her eyes. She'd seen every variation of family betrayal, every scheme, every manipulation. This was just another case to her, another file, another hearing, but to me it was everything. Corbin's attorney stood first. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of lawyer you hire when you have money and need someone who sounds convincing. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth and practiced. "This is a tragic case of elder vulnerability and opportunistic manipulation. My client, Corbin Norwood, brings this petition with the heaviest of hearts. His father, Harlan Norwood, is a 60-year-old paraplegic man who suffers from documented cognitive impairment and declining mental capacity." I sat motionless, hands flat on the binder resting on my lap. "In his vulnerable state," the attorney continued, "Mr. Norwood was targeted by Teresa Madden, a woman he'd never met before. She encountered him at an airport earlier this year. Through undue influence and isolation from his loving family, Ms. Madden has convinced Mr. Norwood to revoke his son's power of attorney and grant her control over his affairs, including a valuable agricultural property worth millions. You learn to read your child's lies the way farmers read weather small signs that tell you everything. The angle of a cloud, the shift in wind, the things most people miss until the storm hits. I'd been reading Corbin since he was 6 years old. I knew when he was lying about broken windows, about missing homework, about where he'd been Friday night, and I knew he was lying now. "My client seeks immediate protective intervention," the attorney said. "A protective order against Ms. Madden, restoration of Mr. Corbin Norwood as legal guardian, and a comprehensive competency evaluation to ensure Mr. Harlan Norwood's safety and well-being going forward." He sat down. Judge Lancaster looked at the file in front of her, then at Corbin. "Mr. Norwood, do you wish to make a statement?" Corbin stood, walked to the witness stand, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Then he sat down and became the concerned son, voice soft, eyes glistening, hands clasped in his lap like he was praying. "Your Honor," he said, and his voice cracked on cue, "I only wanted to protect my father." Pause. Let it land. Let the emotion register. After my father's accident last year, a medical emergency that required hospitalization in Phoenix, I took on the responsibility of coordinating his care, managing his medications, arranging follow-up appointments, making sure he was safe. Another pause, this one longer. But when I tried to schedule his recent appointments, I discovered that a stranger, someone none of us had ever heard of, had taken over his legal affairs, had isolated him from family, had convinced him that the people who love him are somehow his enemies. Vivienne's hand gripped Corbin's shoulder from where she sat in the front row. Support. Unity. Family standing together. Perfect staging. I'm not asking for control, Your Honor. Corbin continued, voice breaking again. I'm asking for protection. For my father. Before it's too late. He looked directly at the judge. Tears in his eyes. Real ones. Or convincing enough that most people wouldn't know the difference. I knew the difference, because I'd seen this exact performance when he was 12 years old, and Eleanor caught him stealing $20 from her purse. The tears. The trembling voice. The I didn't mean to, and I'm sorry, and I just needed it for something important. She'd believed him that time. Given him another chance. Told me he was just a kid learning right from wrong. I'd believed him too, but I'd also watched him practice the tears in the bathroom mirror 2 days later. Watched him perfect the voice crack. Watched him rehearse sincerity until it looked real. He'd been 12 then. He was 35 now. Same performance. Better execution. Corbin stepped down from the witness stand. Returned to his seat. Looked at me one time with those practiced, wounded eyes. I looked back, expressionless. Judge Lancaster made a note in her file. Does the defense wish to respond? Chester stood. Yes, Your Honor. Extensively. I rested my hands on the binder. Felt the weight of 3 inches of documentation. Red tabs. Blue tabs. Yellow tabs. He played his part well. Voice breaking at the right moments, eyes glistening on command. I knew he was a good actor since age 12. I opened the binder. Now it's my turn to present evidence. I opened the binder. The red section comes first. The first document across the table toward Judge Lancaster. The one-way airline confirmation Corbin had booked for me on April 2nd, 2025. Omaha Epley Airfield to Phoenix Sky Harbor. My lawyer inserted the USB drive into the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered, then showed a wide-angle view of Epley Airfield's passenger drop-off zone. Judge Lancaster picked it up, examined it through her reading glasses, then looked at Corbin's lawyer. Any objection to admissibility? The lawyer glanced at Corbin. Corbin stared straight ahead, his hands flat on the table. No objection, Your Honor. Objection! Judge Lancaster asked again, her tone sharpening slightly. No, Your Honor. Third document. Prairie Line Estates sales contract. Signed by Corbin on April 22nd. Purchase price $890,000. Projected close date June 2025. The contract included a rider in small print at the bottom. Seller represents property is unencumbered and free of occupants as of closing. I watched Corbin's jaw tighten. A muscle near his ear twitched. Judge Lancaster set her reading glasses on the bench with a soft click. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. Mr. Norwood, the younger Mr. Norwood, did you sign this contract? Corbin's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, my client, I asked him. Corbin cleared his throat. His voice came out rougher than usual. Yes, Your Honor. But I was under the impression my father had agreed to sell. We'll return to that, Judge Lancaster said, making a note. Continue, Mr. Norwood. I pulled out the yellow section, Chester's investigative notes, and my brother Wade Norwood's audio confession. I handed the transcript to the judge and nodded at my lawyer. He pressed play on the courtroom's audio system. A brief crackle of static, then Wade's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. Yeah, I knew about the plan. Corbin said his dad couldn't manage the land anymore, that it was easier this way. He promised to split the cash to save my repair shop from the bank. Chester's voice. Did you know your brother Harlan was being abandoned? No, Corbin just said he was moving him somewhere with professional help in Phoenix. I didn't ask questions because I was desperate for the money. Wade's voice shook through the speakers. Corbin said he was doing him a favor. That's what Corbin told me. I stopped the playback. The silence felt heavier than before. Judge Lancaster's expression didn't change, but her pen pressed harder into her notepad, leaving a dark line. Is there more? Yes, Your Honor. Green section. I pulled out the surveillance. Still Vivian, on my front porch. April 8th, 2025, photographed by Chester's telephoto lens from across the property line. She was holding a manila folder labeled Durable Power of Attorney in blue ink. The timestamp 2:47 p.m. I'd been inside that afternoon, asleep after physical therapy, exhausted. I slid it across. "I never signed that document," I said. But 3 days later it appeared at the county clerk's office with my signature. Corbin's lawyer finally stood his chair, scraping. "Your Honor, this is speculation. There's no proof." "Then we'll move to proof," I said. I pulled out the blue section Dr. Evander Hayes' certification of mental competence, dated April 30th, 2025. Neurological exam results, cognitive function tests, memory assessments. Every single one is normal. The doctor's signature was bold and certain at the bottom. "Dr. Hayes evaluated me at my request," I said. "He found no impairment, no dementia, no diminished capacity. I knew exactly what was happening." Judge Lancaster read the document slowly, her finger tracing each line. The courtroom air conditioning hummed in the silence. Someone in the gallery shifted, and the bench creaked. Then I pulled out the last item. "Your Honor, I'd like to present video evidence." Corbin's head snapped up. My lawyer inserted the USB drive into the courtroom's display system. The screen flickered, then showed a wide-angle view of Epley Airfield's waiting area near Gate C7, captured from a dome camera mounted on the ceiling. The timestamp in the corner read April 2nd, 2025, 1:18:03 p.m. The footage was crystal clear, high resolution, no grain, no blur. Corbin's truck pulled up to the curb. He got out, walked around to the passenger side, and pulled my wheelchair from the bed. He set it up, locked the wheels, helped me out. His movements were efficient, practiced, almost mechanical. He handed me my duffel bag. Then he leaned down, said something I couldn't hear on the silent footage, and walked back to the driver's side without waiting for a response. I watched myself sit there, looking around, clearly waiting. Corbin got in the truck. The footage played in brutal silence. Corbin positioned my wheelchair near the concrete pillar, adjusted my blanket, snatched the phone from my hand, and dropped it to the floor. Then Vivian took my wallet and passport from my jacket pocket. Within 2 minutes, they pushed their suitcases away and walked toward the boarding gates without looking back. The video cut through all his fabricated claims of coordinating ongoing care. 1:22:34. A security guard in a yellow vest walked past, glanced at me, kept moving. 1:23:17. Still alone. The footage continued. I sat there for another 11 minutes before I finally wheeled myself toward the terminal entrance, moving slowly, awkwardly, bumping over the curb seam where the concrete met the sidewalk. Judge Lancaster leaned forward. "How did you obtain this footage?" "Public records request," my lawyer said. "Airport security retains exterior surveillance for 90 days. We submitted the request on day 87. I replayed the moment Corbin walked away. This time I froze the frame just as he reached the driver's door. "Your Honor, look at his left hand." The image zoomed. Corbin's wrist clearly visible below his rolled sleeve. He was checking his watch as he walked back to the truck, not glancing, checking. Deliberate. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't second-guessing. He was tracking time. I closed the binder. The plastic tabs clicked softly. The courtroom was completely silent. Corbin looked up from the floor. His lawyer whispered something urgent in his ear, leaning close, but he didn't respond. He just sat there, staring at the frozen image on the screen. For the first time in his life, my son had absolutely nothing to say. Judge Lancaster let the silence stretch. Then she looked directly at Corbin and said, "Mr. Norwood, I'd like you to explain the forged signature on the Prairie Line Estates contract. The one notarized by Mr. Norwood while your father was, according to your own testimony, traveling." Corbin's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to request, I asked your client." Corbin's mouth opened, closed. The courtroom polish he'd worn all morning, the pressed suit, the measured tone, the careful deference started to crack at the edges. My father and I had discussed selling, multiple times. He couldn't manage the property anymore. That's not what I asked, Judge Lancaster said. I asked about the signature. Corbin's hands gripped the table edge. Wade handled the paperwork. I trusted him to. Judge Lancaster nodded. The speakers crackled. Vivian's voice recorded on my front porch while I slept inside. Corbin, what if he asks about the power of attorney form? Corbin's response. He won't. Old man barely reads anymore. Just get his signature on anything that looks official. Vivian's face went white. She turned to look at Corbin, but he was staring at the table, his jaw working. Judge Lancaster leaned forward. Mr. Norwood, did you forge your father's signature? Something in Corbin snapped. He slammed both fists on the table. The sound cracked through the courtroom like a gunshot. You selfish bastard. He was looking at me now, his face twisted. I wasted a year playing nice. A year of Sunday dinners and pretending to care about your physical therapy and your stories about Mom. That orchard is mine. I earned it. You were supposed to die in that tractor crash anyway. The courtroom went dead silent. Even his lawyer froze. Judge Lancaster's pen stopped mid-word. She set it down carefully. Mr. Norwood, you are in contempt. Bailiff. The bailiff's hand moved to Corbin's shoulder. Corbin jerked away, but he was done. His face crumpled. He sat down hard, his breathing ragged. Judge Lancaster turned to Wade, who'd been sitting 3 rows back, pale and sweating. Mr. Norwood approached the bench. Wade stood on shaking legs. He walked to the witness stand like a man heading for the gallows. Mr. Norwood. Judge Lancaster said, you notarized a deed transfer on April 15th. Did you witness Harlan Norwood sign that document? Wade's voice came out as a whisper. No, ma'am. Speak up. No, Your Honor. I didn't witness it. Corbin brought it to me already signed. And you notarized it anyway? Wade's hands twisted together. Corbin said he told me it was legitimate, that his father couldn't travel. I owed him money, Your Honor. Gambling markers. He said if I signed as witness, we'd call it even. My lawyer pulled out another document, Wade's bank records subpoenaed 2 weeks ago. Deposits from Corbin totaling $8,000 dated March through April. Wade saw the paper and his face collapsed. He started crying. I didn't know he abandoned him at the airport. I swear I didn't know that part. Corbin just said his dad was going to assisted living, that it was all arranged, that I was just helping with paperwork. Judge Lancaster's expression didn't soften. You'll be referred to the district attorney's office for notary fraud. You're dismissed. Wade stumbled back to his seat. Judge Lancaster called a recess. 30 minutes. I wheeled into the courthouse corridor. The marble floors reflected the afternoon light from the tall windows. Chester followed, carrying his briefcase. We'd barely stopped when Corbin's lawyer approached. He was holding a sealed envelope. Mr. Pemberton, he said, not looking at me. My client would like to propose a settlement. Chester opened the envelope, scanned the single page inside, then handed it to me. The terms were simple. I would transfer 50% ownership of the orchard to Corbin. In exchange, Corbin would withdraw the guardianship petition, and his legal team would request that the court decline criminal referral. I looked at the paper for maybe 5 seconds. No, I said. Chester raised an eyebrow. Harlan, are you certain? This settlement means less friction for everyone. No criminal charges, no prolonged appeals, and you'd keep half the property. I looked out the window. Across the street, a row of maple trees lined the sidewalk, tall, old, their branches reaching wide. Eleanor had planted trees like that around our property 17 years ago. She used to say she was planting them for the shade we'd never sit in for the people who'd come after us. Some work isn't for the people doing it. How many other seniors won't have a Chester Pemberton? I said. How many won't have a private investigator, or the money to hire one, or the physical ability to fight back? I don't want this story ending in silence. Chester studied my face. Then he nodded once, turned to Corbin's lawyer, and handed back the envelope. My client declines. The lawyer's face tightened. He walked away without another word. Chester and I sat on a bench near the window. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. When the bailiff called us back in, Corbin wouldn't look at me. His lawyer sat stiff and silent. Vivian was gone, her seat in the gallery empty. Judge Lancaster took her seat, adjusted her microphone, and opened her notes. I didn't move. I didn't need to. He said I was supposed to die. Said it out loud, his voice echoing off marble walls and wood paneling in front of a circuit court judge and 20 witnesses. I didn't need to say another word. Judge Lancaster adjusted her microphone. The courtroom stayed silent, no shuffling, no whispers, just the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of her turning pages. The gavel falls in utter silence. She looked up. This court finds the evidence presented to be clear, credible, and compelling. The petition for guardianship filed by Corbin Norwood is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Harlan Norwood is found to be in full possession of his mental capacities and is fully competent to manage his own affairs. I didn't move. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap. Furthermore, Judge Lancaster continued, her voice steady and precise, all pending real estate transactions involving the property at 1847 County Road 34, Kearney, Nebraska, are hereby declared void. The deed remains in the sole name of Harlan James Norwood. Corbin's lawyer started to stand, but Judge Lancaster raised one hand. I'm not finished. This court finds that the evidence presented, including audio recordings, video surveillance, falsified documents, and testimony from multiple witnesses, demonstrates a pattern of exploitation, fraud, and elder abuse. This court orders the trial record forwarded to the county prosecutor for criminal indictment proceedings. She looked at the bailiff. Bailiff, execute the warrants. 2 bailiffs stepped forward. One moved toward Corbin, the other toward Vivian, who sat frozen in the gallery, her face pale. Corbin Norwood and Vivian Norwood, you are under arrest for felony exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent. The words kept coming, but I stopped listening. I watched Corbin stand slowly, his movements mechanical. His lawyer said something I couldn't hear. Corbin didn't respond. Vivienne let out a small sound, half gasp, half sob, as the second bailiff reached her row. She looked at me, once her eyes wide and searching, but I didn't look away, and I didn't say anything. Wade Hollis stood from his seat in the back and walked out through the main doors. No one stopped him. Judge Lancaster had already said he'd be referred to the district attorney separately. The bailiff placed handcuffs on Corbin's wrists. The metal clicked shut with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. I felt the weight lift, not satisfaction, not grief. Just the simple physical sensation of pressure releasing, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. Corbin was led toward the side door, the one that connects to the courthouse holding cells. He passed within 6 feet of me. He didn't look back. Judge Lancaster spoke once more. Mr. Norwood, you are free to go. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down again. Final. Chester leaned over and shook my hand. His grip was firm. Congratulations, Harlan. Thank you, I said. My voice came out hoarse. Teresa was waiting in the hallway. She'd sat through the entire trial in the back row, quiet and steady. When she saw me, she smiled, small but genuine. Ready to go home? She asked. Yes, I said. I am. We walked out through the courthouse's front entrance. The late afternoon sun hit my face warm and clean. August in Nebraska. Thick heat cicadas buzzing in the trees across the street. I took a breath and felt it all the way down. Teresa's car was parked in the same spot she'd used the first time back in March, when she'd driven out to get me after the airport. She opened the passenger door and helped me transfer from the wheelchair into the seat. The routine was familiar now. Practiced. She folded the chair, loaded it in the back, and got behind the wheel. We pulled out onto the highway I-80 west toward Kearney. The same route, the same asphalt, the same long stretch of Nebraska farmland rolling out on both sides. But everything was different. Teresa didn't turn on the radio. We drove in silence for the first 20 miles. Not the stunned, fractured silence of that first drive, but something quieter, settled. How do you feel? she asked finally. I watched the fields pass, corn nearly ready for harvest. The stalks were tall and green, their tassels catching the late sun. Tired, I said, and clean. She nodded. She understood. The sunset began to spill orange and pink across the horizon, the same light that had guided us home the first time. The sky stretched wide and open the way it only does out here where there's nothing to block it. I thought about Eleanor, about the trees she'd planted knowing she wouldn't see them fully grown, about the work we do not for ourselves but for what comes after. Maybe that's what this was. Not revenge, not even justice exactly. Just making sure the story didn't end in silence. Thank you, Teresa, I said, for picking up the phone. She glanced over at me, then back at the road. Thank you, Harlan, for letting me drive you home. We passed the Grand Island exit, then the Shelton exit. The miles ticked by, familiar and steady. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like I could rest. That long stretch of asphalt kept rolling under our tires. It was the exact path that marked the end of my betrayal and the true beginning of my independence. The Kearney exit sign appeared in the headlights, green and reflective. Teresa signaled and took the ramp. We turned onto the county road, past the gas station, the grain elevator, the empty lot where the old feed store used to be, then the long gravel drive. The house at the end lights off, waiting. Teresa pulled up to the front porch and put the car in park. This time, I didn't have to strain to remember where the house key was hidden. I didn't have to wonder if anyone would be waiting inside, or if the locks had been changed, or if I'd even be allowed through the door. I was going home. I found the key under the third flower pot on the porch, right where I'd left it. The lock turned smooth. The house smelled like dust and stillness, but it was mine. I wheeled inside and turned on the lights. 2 months after the trial, the computer screen shows another legal filing update. I'm sitting in the home office Eleanor and I used to share. Her desk still has her coffee mug on it, the one with the faded orchard logo, and the county court website refreshes with a new entry. Criminal trial date set for Corbin Norwood and Vivian Norwood, December 2025. Charges felony forgery, vulnerable adult abandonment, and grand larceny. I close that tab and open the next one. Wade Norwood's auto repair shop on 5th Street went into foreclosure last week. Bank seized the property after he defaulted on 3 consecutive payments. The listing says the building will be auctioned in November. Another tab. Prairie Line Realty is under state license investigation. The filing from the Nebraska Real Estate Commission cites failure to verify power of attorney documentation before executing listings. It's the 3rd brokerage flagged this month. Chester told me the commission is using my case as a template for new verification protocols. I scroll down. Civil restitution order Corbin Norwood to return full orchard operating account balance to Harlan James Norwood. Amount $47,000. Payment due within 90 days or subject to wage garnishment. The money's already back in the account. Corbin paid it the week after sentencing. I lean back in the wheelchair and look out the window at the orchard rows. The apples are nearly ready. Another 2 weeks and we'll start harvest. Chester called yesterday to tell me he's been contacted by 4 elder law firms about consulting work. They want him to speak at a conference in Lincoln about financial abuse red flags and investigative protocols. He asked if I'd be willing to let him share the case anonymized, no names, as a teaching example. I said yes, because that's the point, isn't it? Not just one verdict. Not just one family torn apart and badly stitched back together, but a pattern, a template, a way for other people to see the signs before it's too late. Eleanor used to say her trees didn't bear fruit the first year she planted them. She said some roots take time to become family that you plant for the harvest you won't see. I close the laptop. The cascade is bigger than I expected. Corbin and Vivian in holding pattern waiting for trial. Wade's business gone. Prairie Line scrambling to avoid license revocation. Chester building something new out of what we documented. and me sitting here in the quiet watching it all ripple outward. I don't feel victorious. I just feel like the work got done. 3 months after the trial, I drive to Omaha with Teresa to meet Chester at his office. The drive is easy now. Familiar. Teresa talks about the orchard harvest projections, about the new hires we brought on for the season, about the irrigation system repairs we're scheduling for November. I listen and add a comment here and there, but mostly I just let her talk. She's good at this. The planning, the managing. The orchard responds to her the way it used to respond to Eleanor, like it knows it's in capable hands. Chester's office is on the 3rd floor of a building near the old market. He meets us in the lobby and we take the elevator up. His desk is covered in file folders, legal pads, and a half-empty coffee mug that says, "World's okayest lawyer." He clears a space and gestures for us to sit. "So," he says, folding his hands, "you said this was important." I take a breath. "I want to file for adult adoption, Teresa as my legal daughter." Chester doesn't react right away. He just looks at me, then at Teresa, then back at me. "It's legal in Nebraska," I continue. "Adult adoption provides full statutory kinship, inheritance rights, medical decision authority, next of kin status, everything." Chester nods slowly. "It is legal, and it's a significant step." He turns to Teresa. "Have you two discussed this?" Teresa's hands are folded in her lap. She's quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the window. Outside, the Omaha skyline stretches low and flat under an October sky. When she speaks, her voice catches just slightly on the first word. "Since I was 10, I haven't had anyone I could call Dad." She doesn't say more. She doesn't need to. Chester lets the silence sit. Then he reaches for a file on the corner of his desk. "The forms are ready whenever you both are. I pulled them last week." I look at him. "You knew," he smiles just a little. "I had a hunch. You don't ask someone to be your emergency contact and co-signer on the orchard account unless you're thinking long-term." He spreads the papers out on the desk. Petition for adult adoption, consent forms, affidavits. The language is formal and bureaucratic, but underneath it all is something simple: family. Not the family you're born into. The family you choose. The family that drives 3 hours to pick you up from an airport when you've been abandoned. The family that sits across from you at a lawyer's desk and says the word "Dad" like she's testing out a key that finally fits. Teresa looks at the forms, then at me. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I say. She nods. Her eyes are bright, but she's not crying. She's just steady. The way she's always been. Chester picks up a pen and clicks it once. "All right, let's make it official." He slides the first form toward me. I sign my name, Harlan James Norwood. Then he slides it to Teresa. She hesitates for just a second, her hand hovering over the line. Then she writes Teresa Madden Norwood. The ink is still wet when Chester opens the file folder. I look at Teresa across the desk. She looks back at me, eyes steady and clear. She doesn't need to ask if I'm sure. She knows. The November harvest came in stronger than any year I could remember. 42 bins stacked along the barn wall by the end of the second week, more than the orchard had yielded since Eleanor was alive to coax the trees into their best seasons. Teresa kept the inventory log with the same calm precision she brought to everything, calling out bin numbers without being asked, cross-referencing the buyer contracts against the weight tickets before anyone suggested she should. She'd learned the work the way Eleanor had, by doing it, not by being taught. Shelby stopped by on the last picking day, the way she'd been stopping by for 30 years. She walked the rows with us in the late afternoon, hands in her coat pockets, nodding at the trees like they were old acquaintances. "Good year," she said simply. That was enough. That same month, the Apple Tree Home opened its doors on Main Street in downtown Kearney. Chester handled the legal filings. Teresa painted the sign herself, a spare, clean apple tree with roots spreading wide beneath the branches. Below it, a single line: "Because family is who comes back." We kept the mission narrow pro bono consultation document review and emergency referrals for Nebraska seniors facing exploitation by the people who were supposed to protect them. No courtrooms, no drama, just someone answering the phone when it rang. It rang 12 times in the first week. I sat in the corner alcove and listened to every one of them. A woman whose grandson had emptied her account. A man whose daughter controlled the mortgage on his own house. A widow who couldn't read her own bank statements because her son-in-law had changed the login. I didn't offer solutions. Teresa handled that. I just said the same thing to each of them. You're not alone. You don't have to stay quiet. In December, on a cold, still morning that smelled like frozen earth and something almost like spring, Teresa brought 2 cups of coffee onto the porch. She sat on the wooden step beside my wheelchair, both of us looking out at the bare rows. After a while, she said one word. "Dad." I looked at her. She was watching the trees, Eleanor's trees, now hers too. "Yeah, kid," I said. We sat there together until the light changed. "And to you listening to my story, remember this: family isn't always who you're born to. Looking back, I made mistakes. I trusted without verifying. I saw what I wanted to see in my son instead of what was really there. I ignored the small signs because I didn't want to believe my own child could betray me. Don't make my mistake. When someone close to you starts asking unusual questions about your assets, your property, your legal documents, pay attention. Trust your instincts. The lesson I learned is this: vulnerability doesn't mean powerless. Even from a wheelchair, even at 60, even after being abandoned, you can fight back if you document everything and find people who genuinely care. I believe God put me through this for a reason. Not just to save my orchard, but to help other seniors facing the same exploitation. Teresa wasn't sent by accident. The apple tree home exists because the hardest family stories can become the foundation for protecting others. That's why I share these grandpa stories, real experiences that carry real warnings. If this family story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you faced something similar? Do you know a grandparent who needs to hear grandpa stories like mine? These are the kinds of family stories that need to be shared. Please pass this along to anyone who might need it. And if you want more grandpa stories that matter, consider subscribing. Your support helps us reach the people who need these messages most. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One final reminder. Certain details in this family story have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real individuals or situations is coincidental. What matters is the lesson, and I hope it stays with you. God bless.